I still wake up at 6:30 a.m. for a life that no longer exists. I kept my eyes on that blank note longer than I meant to. The cursor blinked back at me, calm, steady, almost indifferent to my doubt. For most of my life, the next step had never been my decision. There was always someone pointing the way. A boss, a deadline, a shared calendar stuck to the fridge telling me where I needed to be. Now there was only this small white screen and the uncomfortable silence beneath it. A single question, waiting. What do you actually want? Not what sounds impressive, not what looks responsible, not what would make other people feel relieved about you. What do you want? My first reaction was to shut it down, close the app, slide the phone back into my pocket, promise myself I'd figure it out tomorrow. But tomorrow had become a dangerous word. Tomorrow was where clarity kept getting postponed. Tomorrow was where courage went to hide. So instead, I typed something simple, almost awkward, something I'd be embarrassed to say out loud. Learn one new skill. That was all. No 5-year plan, no reinvention, no bold declaration, just one honest sentence. I saved the note, put the phone away, and walked home in silence. The next morning didn't bring answers. There was no rush of motivation, no sense of rebirth, no inner voice telling me I had finally arrived at the beginning of something new. It was just morning, soft light through the blinds, a quiet apartment, and the same version of me, still tired, still unsure. I made coffee, sat at the table, and felt the familiar pull toward my phone, to check messages, to distract myself, to disappear into noise for a few minutes. Instead, I opened the note again. Learn one new skill. I let out a quiet laugh. It sounded naive, almost too small to matter, but it was something. And right now, something was enough. So I asked myself a better question. What have I always been curious about, but never allowed myself the space to explore? The answer caught me off guard. For years, I'd been fascinated by how things were built. Websites, systems, small businesses that grew from nothing but an idea and patience. I'd always told myself it was too late, too complicated, too risky. That was the old voice speaking, the voice that demanded certainty before movement, the voice that needed guarantees before effort. I opened my laptop, not with confidence, with curiosity. I watched one short video, then another. I barely understood what I was seeing, and that was uncomfortable, but something else happened at the same time. I wasn't thinking about my resume. I wasn't thinking about my age. I wasn't thinking about who I used to be. I was present. That first day, I learned almost nothing useful. I closed the laptop feeling slow, behind, out of place. But I noticed something subtle. The weight in my chest felt lighter, not gone, just quieter. So I did it again the next day, and the next. No announcements, no social posts, no dramatic new chapter speeches. Just me, a table, a screen, and a willingness to feel inexperienced again. Some days were harder than others. I'd catch myself thinking, you should be further by now. People your age already have this figured out. What if this leads nowhere? On those days, I went back to walking. Same streets, same windows, different thoughts. I stopped measuring my worth by speed and started measuring it by honesty. Was I showing up, even when no one was watching, even when there was no applause? One afternoon, my ex called. Her name on my screen tightened something in my chest. Old instincts surfaced immediately. I answered. We spoke politely, carefully, like two people handling something fragile. At the end of the call, she paused and said, I'm glad you sound calmer. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. After we hung up, I sat there longer than I expected. And then it hit me. The life we had built together was over. But so was the version of me who needed that life to feel whole. That realization hurt and freed me at the same time. Weeks passed. I started building small things, messy things, projects that barely worked. But they were mine. For the first time in years, effort didn't feel like performance. It felt like progress. One night, as I shut down my laptop, something became clear. I wasn't trying to recover my old life. I was building a new relationship with myself, one based on patience, curiosity, and the quiet understanding that growth doesn't need an audience. I still don't have everything figured out. I don't know exactly where this leads, or what it will become, or how long it will take. But I do know this. Losing everything stripped away the noise, and beneath it, I found something solid. Not confidence, not certainty. At 42, I discovered a truth no one ever prepares you for. You can spend years building a life with care, brick by brick, routine by routine, and still watch it unravel without ever being asked for consent. My name is Michael. I live alone now, in a modest apartment on the edge of the city, one bedroom, walls thin enough to hear other people's lives passing through them, a window that looks out over a parking lot that never fully sleeps. Some evenings I don't turn on the television, not out of discipline, not as a statement, but because silence feels more honest than noise. I still wake up early, 6:30 a.m., out of muscle memory. My body still follows a schedule designed for a life that's gone. I stand in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee, and without realizing it, I listen for sounds that used to mean home. Her footsteps, a cabinet closing, her voice asking if I wanted eggs. There's nothing, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the quiet confirmation that I'm on my own. The job disappeared first. There was no explosion, no raised voices, no mistake I could replay and correct. Just a conference room that felt unusually cold, a calm voice, carefully chosen phrases like restructuring and new direction. My manager sat with his hands folded, like he was holding a fragile truth. He said, "This isn't personal, Michael." I nodded, as if maturity meant not flinching, as if understanding could be forced. I even said, "I'm grateful for the opportunity." I shook his hand, walked out, rode the elevator down beside two people who had no idea my identity had just cracked. In the parking garage, I sat behind the wheel without starting the car. My hands rested there. Not tense, just steady, like they were waiting for instructions. I remember thinking, with unsettling clarity, if I go home right now, I don't know who I am. Because for years, when someone asked how I was doing, I answered with my job, without ever noticing. Then the marriage ended. Most people picture divorce as chaos, arguments, broken plates, a final, dramatic blow-up. That wasn't us. Ours was quiet, measured, as if we were afraid of making too much noise. We sat at the kitchen table. The house still carried the scent of her shampoo. She didn't look angry. She looked exhausted. She said, "I don't think we're good for each other anymore." I focused on the wood grain beneath my hands, as if the table might tell me how to save us. I asked, "Is there someone else?" She shook her head. "No, there's just nothing here now. Nothing." That word hit harder than blame ever could. I searched for a promise, a plan, an argument strong enough to slow her down, but I couldn't sell hope when I no longer felt it. At the door, as she lifted her bag, she paused, like she almost reached for my arm, like she wasn't sure she had the right anymore. I asked, "So this is it?" She answered softly, "I think it has to be." And then she was gone. No shouting, no winner, no one to blame, just an empty hallway and the sound of a door closing with finality. After that, time lost its edges. I told people I was okay, sent brief messages. Just adjusting. Things are changing, but I'll manage. Then I'd sit on the edge of my bed, still fully dressed, staring at the floor, like it owed me an explanation. What surprised me wasn't the sadness. It was the shame. I felt exposed at the grocery store, awkward at the gas station, like everyone could see I no longer belonged to a clear story. I stopped returning calls, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to admit the truth. I lost the thing that made me feel valuable, and the person who made me feel chosen. Some nights I whispered, "How did this happen?" as if the question belonged to someone else. And then another thought followed. If I'm not my career, if I'm not a husband, who am I? I didn't know, so I started walking. At first it was survival, a way to drain the restless energy, a way to move my body so my thoughts wouldn't tear me apart. I walked after dinner, as the sky faded into gray, down the same streets, past windows glowing with lives that weren't mine. Sometimes I caught small scenes through the glass. A couple laughing, a child running down a hallway, a dog spinning in excitement. Ordinary moments. And my chest tightened, like my life had quietly been handed to someone else. One evening, I walked farther than usual. I ended up near a diner I'd never noticed. A flickering sign, a few trucks parked outside. I wasn't hungry, I just wasn't ready to go back yet. Inside, it smelled like coffee and grilled onions. A waitress in her 50s glanced up and said, "Sit wherever you like, sweetheart." I slid into a booth by the window. She returned with a menu I didn't open. "You meeting someone?" she asked. For a second, I almost said yes. Out of habit, out of pride, but I was too tired to pretend. "No," I said. "I just needed a place to be." She didn't pity me, didn't try to rescue me. She simply nodded, like that answer made sense. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yes." As she poured it, I watched the steam rise, and my thoughts finally slowed. Not calm, just quiet. She set the mug down and asked, "Going through a rough season?" I looked at the cup, then at her. I didn't explain, didn't tell the story, didn't ask for sympathy. I just said the truth. "I don't know what comes next." She held my eyes for a moment, then said evenly, "That's honest," and walked away. That was all. 2 words, but they broke something open, because I'd spent months trying to sound composed, trying to package my pain into something respectable, and a stranger had just allowed me to admit, "I don't know." When I stepped back outside, the air felt colder, but I kept walking, until my legs hurt, until my thoughts slowed enough for something deeper to surface. A realization that made me uncomfortable. Maybe the fear wasn't just about loss. Maybe it was about exposure. No title, no routine, no marriage, no role, just me. And that terrified me, because starting over came with no guarantees. But then another thought followed. If I truly had nothing left to lose, what if that wasn't only fear? What if it was freedom? I stopped beneath a streetlight and looked at my hands. The same hands that signed contracts, fixed broken things, held hers in waiting rooms, paid bills, tried to be dependable. They were still here. I whispered, "All right, what now?" There was no answer, but there was something else, a quiet challenge. Because somewhere beneath the loss, a part of me was beginning to understand something I wasn't ready to admit. The life I lost might be the life I was clinging to, and the life ahead of me might demand a version of myself I haven't met yet. I stood there for a long time. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, opened a blank note. My thumb hovered over the screen, not to text, not to scroll, not to escape, but to write one sentence, the first sentence of whatever comes next. And as I began to type, my hands started to shake. Responsibility for my time, my attention, my next choice. At 42, I didn't start over because I was fearless. I started over because staying the same finally felt more dangerous than changing. And if you're hearing this, standing in the wreckage of a life you thought was permanent, here's what I've learned. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need permission. You don't need to feel ready. You only need the courage to take one honest step without knowing where it leads. Because sometimes losing everything isn't the end of your story. It's the moment you stop living someone else's version of it and begin writing your own, one quiet sentence at a time.